This has to be one of the worst kept secrets for a new upcoming product. This is the brand new Bambu Lab A1 Mini and the new AMS Lite 3D printer combination that I'm going to be reviewing in today's video. Now I know you and I were both hoping for a much larger Bambu Lab announcement for something that was going to be something able to support much larger 3D printed helmets and just larger objects similar to their Bambu Lab X1 Carbon or the P1P or the newly announced P1S that I'll also have a review video up here in the upcoming weeks, taking a little bit more time with that one here. But this is their new entry-level machine designed for people to get started with 3D printing, or maybe you want to get started with multicolor 3D printing. This might be an affordable, a very aggressively affordable way to get started with that, and high speed and allowing you to print pretty fast with some really amazing features. But it's got some issues along the way here. By the way, I also wanted to mention that Bambu Lab is not sponsoring this video. They did send the printer and combination here along for me to review, but they're not paying me to make this video. They haven't seen this video, and in fact, they really haven't heard much from me other than some of the issues that I'll be telling you about here in today's video. Me and new printers, man, I just have not had the best luck with brand new 3D printers. And I've got a live print running next to me right now while I'm recording this. This machine is definitely much quieter than the previous Bambu Lab 3D printers. It's not whisper quiet, but it definitely is pretty quiet compared to most other 3D printers. The loudest part of this thing is definitely the fans, especially when they're kicking up and revving up. You can put it in silent mode as well, which helps ever so slightly, but that fan still is pretty loud at times. But some basic information about this new A1 Mini 3D printer. It's 180 millimeters cubed build volume. It's a bed slinger design. It's actually reminding me very much of the Monoprice Mini that was very popular a handful of years back. This is probably going to be a great entry-level 3D printer for people just getting started with 3D printing. And what's really great about this machine is there is next to no assembly required once you take it out of the box. I think I installed the little filament cutter spitter out thing here on the side. I had to plug in a PTFE tube. I had to unscrew a few things on the side to get this all connected, but that was about it other than plugging it in. And in fact, the plug to the 3D printer is built into it. You don't even have to plug that in. You just have to plug it into an outlet. One of the other big standout features that is on this machine that you're not going to find on the P1P or the P1S is that touch screen interface. Thank you, and I'm really hoping we see something like that on a refresh version of the P1P or the P1S, because I am not a big fan of that current wheel click-through design that's on the P1P and the P1S. I have an upcoming video on a way that you can mod that to make it much more enjoyable. And the big one here is the aggressive pre-order pricing that's available for the A1 Mini and the AMS Lite, coming in at $459 for a 3D printer that allows you to do 4-color 3D printing. Is kind of wild. Again, it's fast and it's semi-reliable, and print quality, we'll get into that. It's really good, but definitely some issues along the way there. Another really cool thing that Bambu Lab's doing with this printer combination is if you purchase one of them, you'll get a 1-in-4 mystery gift. And in this case, I've got a compact mouse kit that has all of the internal electronic components, but I need to run off and 3D print the outer casing for this. I haven't run off and 3D printed this. I think I'm gonna do a live stream where I stream the actual printing of this and just answer questions from you guys as it's printing, so stay tuned for that. Now, I'm not sure if this is included in all the upcoming units or not, but they also included this Bambu Filament swatches set that I think is amazing. So this gives you an idea of all of the different 3D printed colors and material types that are available from Bambu Lab. And honestly, this is something that I would want to print on my own and have on display, but having the ability to just have this included in the printer package is a fantastic option, in my opinion. Now, I could easily go on for a solid hour talking about this 3D printer, but I want to get through some of the key points here. The first one is I want to talk about the AMS Lite versus the standard AMS unit. The pros for this new AMS Lite is that's much easier to maintain, easier to work with. Obviously, you now have 4 individual PTFE tubes. So if you ended up getting a clog in one of these, you can easily dislocate the PTFE tube and clear that clog, versus the current AMS system. You have to unscrew things and take things apart, and it's kind of a pain when you get a clog in there. One of the big ones that I really like about the AMS Lite over the current AMS is that it supports more types and sizes of spools, including cardboard spools, without having to print any other sort of wheel attachment for those so that they glide properly in the AMS. Obviously, it's still going to read the Bambu Lab filaments, so if you're purchasing filaments from Bambu Lab, you're going to be able to use those spools and have it automatically feed and update directly on the printer with those. And again, it's much more affordable than the current AMS unit. And a few of the cons that I have with the new AMS Lite is that it takes up more space. That's probably the biggest con that I have for this overall printer and the machine. It takes up so much more space than the current X1 printers or the P1P or the P1S with the AMS that you have sitting on top, or even if you wanted to put that on the side. I guess if you put it on the side, it's still going to take up the same amount of space, but it takes up so much horizontal space on a workbench or wherever you might have this set up to be able to support both of these machines. Also, it can be a little cumbersome getting filament on and off the rolls. A lot of times I felt like I was going to knock over the AMS Lite when trying to take the rolls off or trying to push them on. It can kind of be a tight fit sometimes, especially with those cardboard rolls, which you got to be careful with, but they still fit. You're also feeding filament in from the underside, and it's hard to see where the hole opening is. And sometimes I've slid it in between the hole and the gap there. That is when you press on the lever, filament will go inside the AMS Lite, the clear area there. So you want to be careful of that when you're installing filament, but it still grabs the filament and automatically feeds it in, which is fantastic. Also, it clogs just as easily as the other typical AMS. I've run into a few different clogs that we'll talk about here. Also, one other big one is obviously you can print entirely without the AMS unit attached. If you wanted to, there is a side mounted spool holder for you to attach your filament to. I mentioned it before, but I'll say it again. One of the big selling points for this machine is how quiet it's supposed to be. And it's definitely quieter, again, than the other X1 3D printers or the P1P. However, it's definitely still loud. That fan will definitely kick up and you'll hear it. It's very noticeable, but I have had this sitting in my office while I'm working, and it's bearable to have printing in the background where it being barely noticeable. You know, they say it's got some intelligence built into this where it can detect things like clogs and whatnot if the filament's not running properly. Yeah, it's definitely, I've run into issues with this where it's just printing midair from a clog and totally did not recognize that. So I'm not sure how intelligent it actually is. I'm sure these things are going to improve. I've already received multiple firmware updates for the machine over the few weeks that I've had access to it, which is fantastic to see. But I'm expecting a little bit more from it. Again, that camera that's installed on there, there is a little visor thing that you can flip over to cover the camera, which is fantastic to see. And there's a light, but don't expect to be doing time lapses with that. It's barely usable, but good enough for you to check on your prints. The machine also has Wi-Fi capabilities baked into it along with that mobile app. The Wi-Fi setup is really straightforward and simple. Also, I'm liking the binding option here to the networks. I typically will move my printers from this building here back to my house, and having to disconnect these from the networks and reconnect them on some of the other Bambu Lab printers is kind of a pain because it has to, for some reason, delete your account from the machine in order to connect to the Wi-Fi. That's no longer an issue with the new A1 Mini. So that's a really great thing, for at least for me. Now, it also has this little purge mechanism here on the side. So as it spits out filament, it's going to slingshot it off of the side of the printer. And that's where you need like a box or bin or something to catch that. But it's not perfect, and it slings it kind of all over the place. It ends up on the bed. Here you can see an example of it actually in the purge tower. And I've had that happen with pretty much every multicolor print that I've attempted so far. And again, one of my biggest pain points about the machine is the form factor of this and how much space this combination takes up. This is going to take up at least 25 to 30 inches of desktop countertop space for your printer, AMS Lite, and some kind of bin to catch the filament that's shooting out of that. That's almost double the width of two of the X1s or your P1P 3 printers side by side. This just takes up a lot of space. So if you're considering having a bunch of these and you're planning on having multiple AMS units, it's going to be fun trying to figure out how exactly you set those up to optimize the space that you might have. And as some of you know, I have the worst luck with brand new 3D printers, and this was definitely the case with this. My very first print, which was one of these razor blade bed scrapers that comes preloaded on the machine, failed. The filament got stuck in the extruder there, or the AMS Lite unit, and I could not get it out. And I tried using the unload command, which is a recurring theme here, where the unload would actually get stuck and I couldn't get the filament out. So I had to turn off the machine because there's no way to exit out of that menu, and then power it back up and then rerun the whole process over again. And then I was able to get the filament out. The next time I ran that print, it went properly and everything worked properly there. So no issues the second time around, zero idea what went wrong. If you follow me over on Twitter, you might have seen a few weeks ago that I was posting about Wekster's dice tower that he made. This printed so nicely. This wasn't a multicolor print. This was just two separate print jobs using two different colors filament there. And I did run into a few issues, but I think that was mostly on my end of not having this properly supported on the teeth and then just doing a bad job cleaning it up. But overall, the print quality of this coming off of the A1 Mini looks so good. I then wanted to test out the AMS Lite doing a big multicolored print job. So I threw down one of 3D Printing World's multicolor Katana files, and yeah, this did not go well. This initially ended up printing fine for the first handful of hours, and then this is where I ran into one of those major clogs, and it just continued to print straight into air and didn't stop or notice or run into any issues whatsoever, and just kept going. So I had to stop the print, and I essentially just kind of gave up on that print job. And by the way, this was another instance of where I had a big clog in the extruder and had to learn the new process of removing a clog from this new machine. And it's surprisingly very easy, where you can just remove the front plate from the 3D printer. And then there's a latch system involved there. And then you can just remove the hot end, clear any jam that you might have in there, or swap it out for a new one. It's a really simple process unless you get filament stuck inside that. While recording this video, I was shooting some B-roll trying to get this whole process on camera, and ended up noticing that I had filament stuck in there, and I could not get that little latch undone unless I heated it up. Now, I obviously went off and 3D printed some things like benchies, but we've seen a million of those before. What I went off and printed was this really cool ghost in a hat file from HoloProps. This is a perfect example of the type of file that you can run off and print over on the A1 Mini. This is a Patreon file that I could potentially run off and sell on Etsy or any other site that I'd be interested in. This was printed in multiple pieces. It's not a multicolor print, but I ended up having to reprint this multiple times because of all of the crazy clogs that I kept running into with this print job. This was initially driving me absolutely insane. I was then able to run off and 3D print something that looks like it should be impossible to 3D print, especially on this really budget-friendly A1 Mini, and it's this rain umbrella scene by 3D Print Bunny. This prints without any supports, and it's like this amazing optical illusion effect, just using bridging and filament there to create that rain effect. And this printed perfectly on the A1 Mini. AgepBiz, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, was kind enough to share his multicolor Parrot file with me. And unfortunately, this failed epically when I tried to do a multicolor print with it. Yeah, it just wasted a whole bunch of filament there. However, I did reattempt that and was able to get 3 of these to actually print. It did produce a ton of filament waste. That's the one downside with the multicolor printing, is that it just produces so much waste. And a fun fact is you can actually print multiple of one object and it's going to produce the same amount of waste. So if you're not familiar with this, it's a great way to print multiples of one object, and it only takes like a fraction of the time more to print a few more of them. And the next logical step was to scale that up by 600% in scale and print these, and they turned out beautifully. Now, this is what I'm talking about, and I can see why so many people enjoy multicolor 3D printing. It's not so much a thing for me. It just produces so much wasted filament. There's easily, I feel like there's more wasted filament inside this box than what's actually contained in these two parrots. But the results just look so friggin' cool. And the last thing I went off and printed is this Darth Maul skull from the Galactic Armory that I'm printing here overnight before this video posts, and I just realized that I mixed up the colors of the skull. I loaded the colors into the wrong AMS slots, so the red and black are reversed. Also, I was not able to get the back of the skull to print successfully on the A1 Mini. It was driving me nuts, so I decided to run off and print that on the P1P. Now, the A1 Mini and the AMS Lite certainly isn't for everyone, especially if you're an existing Bambu Lab user. I know, again, I've been waiting for the larger version. I know you're waiting for the larger version, but we got a smaller one here, which is perfect option for anyone starting out with 3D printing, or maybe you're looking to set up a small farm of 3D printers. This could be a great option for you. And I'm really looking forward to Bambu allowing you to buy just the Mini or the AMS Lite. So if you wanted to add more AMS units to your lineup of existing Bambu printers, you'll hopefully be able to do that here sometime in the near future. I also want to say a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters for your continued support of me making videos here on the interwebs. If you're interested in things like my 3D printer settings, you can find those over in my Patreon. But let me know what you think about the A1 Mini and the AMS Lite and this new combination from Bambu Lab, and if it's everything that you were expecting, or if they're off mark, or whatever it may be. Hey, thanks so much for watching, you all, and I'll see you next time.